And we're live. Welcome to Connecting the Universe. I'm author and researcher Mike Ricksecker, back at you with another interactive class out of the secret library of the Connected Universe. All right. Well, I told you guys that this was going to be the spooky one since it is October and this is spooky season. During the after show last week, the Connected Universe members said they wanted an episode on shadow people. And so we will be talking about shadows this evening. We're going to be talking about a variety of different phenomena, not just shadows. And the reason being, not to not to try to discredit the members. I want to give you exactly what you asked for, and I'm going to. Um, but we do discuss the shadow phenomenon a lot within the class. We just did shadows and time slips a few weeks ago, so I'm trying to break it up a little bit. We will definitely talk about shadow phenomena. We're going to talk about other phenomena that is related, and we're going to have a number of clips here mixed in throughout. So yeah, I'm wearing my Jack. I don't know if you can see it all that well. It's my Jack Skellington Game of Thrones Halloween is Coming T-shirt, for the season. So I do want to let those know that are listening to the podcast version later. Please join us every Wednesday night, 8:00 p.m. Eastern Time, for the full Connecting the Universe experience on connecteduniverseportal.com. So there's a lot of great information out there in addition to the weekly class. Again, those that are members, you get into the after show for that. But there's also sneak peek and behind the scenes videos of all the projects, tours, different things that we're doing. Monthly Q&A videos, exclusive articles, insider video travel blogs like Ancient Egypt, America Southwest, Ireland. There's the morning mug videos, and we've really been doing a lot more with those lately. We're going to do some live ones here coming up. And for the season, I decided to kind of dust off Paranormal Vines. If you remember the Paranormal Wine Show, as a kind of bonus for the news about those wine jars that were found at Abydos, the 5,000-year-old wine jars. So that was a lot of fun. So go ahead and check that out. All of this and more, connecteduniverseportal.com. By the way, members, go ahead and get the app. Download that when you log into the community area. Through your phone, you'll find a link up there where you can download the app, and then you get all the updates to your phone when we go live, when new videos are uploaded, when there's interaction within the site. You can get all of that straight to your phone. And by the way, I did listen. We're going to talk a little bit more about this during the after show about the way the site is put together. We have some new ways that we're going to be kind of splitting that up. And, well, the secret library. I mean, this is a secret library, right? Back behind me. The secret library will become a real thing out on the Connected Universe Portal website. All right. And then also, of course, we need to talk about Egypt, which is coming up here April 16th to the 28th, 2024. There's still time to get in on that and join us for the Stargates of Ancient Egypt tour. It's an amazing tour. You guys have seen a lot of the footage and everything that I've brought back from there, all the secret, esoteric, ancient wisdom that we've dove into. And there's more on that coming in other formats that I can't really talk about at the moment. So, all right. See, a number of people are down in the chat. We got Jill Nimchinsky's in the house. Sylvain, great to see you. Deborah Mueller, good to see you as well. There's Alina, our chat moderator. Wonderful to see you as well. Raven is in the house. All right. There is Jen. Greetings and salutations. Pump up the volume, Christian Slater. Actually, no, that would have been Heather's Christian Slater. It's still Christian Slater. Crow Emil S. Good to see you as well. There is Sarah Youssef, one of those who voted for Shadows this evening. All right. Looks like she is in there on the portal side as well. All right. Oh, and Jason Thompson. Hello, everyone from Atlanta. Good to see you, Jason. Okay, so shadows. What else do we need to do here? Oh, the class question. Um, so the last time I checked, okay, what was the strangest or most unusual type of entity you've witnessed? Nobody answered. There were a couple of comments, but nobody actually answered the question. So if somebody wants to throw down there in the chat, what's the strangest or most unusual type of entity you've witnessed? Go ahead and put it down there. I do want to say this, because that, and we've kind of all been down that road, and it's one of the reasons that we've all come together in this type of setting, this type of a format to talk about these type of topics, is most of us have had some sort of strange experience in our lives that made us go, what in the world was that? Some have it and they're just really, really curious about the phenomenon, which is wonderful. But many of us have. And one of the things that is wonderful about this format and what's been going on the last 25 years, from what's been going on with the advent of the World Wide Web to the different television shows that have been proliferated out there, that it's helping us to realize we're not alone in this phenomenon. There are other people who have experienced these things too. So, back in the day, it was taboo. People thought you were crazy. We no longer really have that stigma. Sure, there's a few out there who are always going to be like that, but a lot of that has gone away. So I encourage people, tell your story. So, and that's, a lot of the stories that were sent my way over the years, were people opening up, either for the first time or, where it was a story that you hadn't really told before, that sort of thing. So, all right. Let's go ahead and get into shadows. Alina says she answered. I guess I missed it. So it must have come in late because I haven't had a chance to look over like the last half hour, 45 minutes. So if you want to toss it down there, Alina, I know you've had a lot of shadow questions. So so that is I'm guessing that's probably going to be it. And Sam Blue is in the house. Hello there, sending love and light to Mike and everyone on the chat. Well, thank you, Sam. That is very, very kind of you. So we're going to start off talking about shadows, and then we're going to move into some other things here. And so the first one we are going to cover, I have a clip here from Carl Johnson. This is actually from the Shadow Dimension docu-series. And let me go ahead and bring this up. He's going to tell the story there at Slater Mill, and then we're going to get into some other stuff here regarding that, and then other stories and other occurrences.
We are now at Wilkinson Mill, which was constructed in 1810, opened in 1811, and this tied into the early history of the American Industrial Revolution. It has 3-foot thick rubble stone walls built like a fortress or a jailhouse, because the heavy machinery was and is kept upstairs. And when the great water wheel beneath would spin around at full velocity, this whole building would shake like an earth tremor. You can still map out stress fractures in the upper 2 levels from when this was a working mill. And this is home to a resident shadow person who was seen before I started here. I remember we had guests on the grounds and they were very unsettled by the figure they saw walking in there. Eventually, I did witness the shadow person here. That was in January of 2013 during a paranormal investigation. A team, Investigators of the Unknown, was here, and their founder, Jeremiah, and I were upstairs in the machine shop exhibit. The rest of the team members had come outside, and I said, Jerry, one of your people is still inside. He said, no, they're all outside. So we looked, and there's this form, all black like the absence of light, but obviously a human form, and it's moving rapidly, erratically. So we get our flashlights out. Of course, it faded away. So we were able to observe this thing for about 10-12 seconds, and that's a long time to see a ghost. But it just looked like the outline of a man with no features, moving rapidly, not like a living human being would. Shadow ghost has been seen down here. I've seen him twice, and he has an opacity. This form can block out the light from outside. And it shows up mostly in photographs. It's been photographed several times. It might have some agenda, I don't know. Perhaps it's the spirit of someone who worked here. We don't know anything about its history, we just know it exists. And it has an attitude. And we had a group, and I said to whatever spirit resided here, I said, we know you're lingering here. We have brought women and younger folk into your mill. I realize that is the violation of mill protocol. If you want us to clear out, just give us a sign and we will leave. Not expecting much, maybe a rap on the wall. On 2 occasions when I said that, a heavy spike flew off of the blacksmith's bench and went across the floor. And I always had people coming back here every year remembering that happened. They were eyewitness to it. And then of course I brought everybody out. I said, well, if we want the shadow person to cooperate, we're going to have to keep our word and leave now. So there's something here with personality.
All right, good friend Carl Johnson. Yes, part of Shadow Dimension. That's episode 3. So still there streaming on TubiTV, Roku Channel. YouTube has also picked that up here recently. At least I've been notified that they picked it up. So not on the regular free YouTube. It's one of those like where you can watch movies and things like that. Not YouTube TV, but regular YouTube. And so they've added it or are going to add it to that lineup. So that's another place where you will be able to watch that. Jen says, I probably should actually go visit that place. It's kind of right down the road from her a few minutes. So yeah. Okay. Interesting question here from Sarah. You find a big distinction between distinction in activity between male and female shadow people. So it's interesting here is that a lot of people, when they have an interaction with a shadow person, they don't necessarily differentiate between male and female. Usually they just say it's a shadow. I would say that there are probably more reports of a male type of shadow entity, whether that's like, the Hat Man type one, hat wearing entities. A lot of times you'll get the the Men in Black type of one, which we're going to talk about here soon. In a lot of the ones that approach people in the middle of the night, go running down the hall, anything like that. A lot of time, the kind of quote unquote humanoid figure one is designated as, in more cases than not, male energy. But that does not mean that most shadow people are male rather than female. It's really hard to kind of gauge a number on that because you're going off of the reports that we have in place, fleeting memories from people, that sort of thing, which is something that makes this research really difficult. But there are many, shadow entities that do appear as some sort of womanly form. And again, it's one of those, you're going by some very, very scant features, right? So like a hooded figure, well, you can't really see under the hood is kind of the issue. So is that male or female? So you're trying to gauge by the energy of that. The humanoid figures usually seems to be like shorter hair, maybe even like bald sort of thing. Now you have the old hag. So the old hag usually shows up as, of course, a woman. And that's usually the little old woman. Sometimes it shows up as like a ghoulish sort of thing. But I do have stories of people reporting that it seems like a womanly figure that is a shadow, or they could see like a flowing type hair, but again, in shadow form. My good friend Rob Guttrow, there's a shadow story that he talks about that was his aunt. So, obviously, if it's his aunt, then that's a woman. So they do come in both forms. I would just say there are more reports that lean toward the male side than the female side, but I would say most people don't really even differentiate between the two. And so Mr. Kuman, is the old hag considered a shadow? It is part of the shadow phenomenon lexicon because of the whole sleep paralysis element that is associated with it. There are many times people wake up, they have the sleep paralysis, they just see the shadow. There are times that people wake up, have the sleep paralysis, and they got the old hag sitting on top of them. So this is why it's a related phenomenon. They seem to kind of go hand in hand. Sometimes the thing that's sitting on them is a shadow. So, and one of them, I do have it in the book, A Walk in the Shadows, where it was in shadowy form. It was the old hag. He could make out that it was the old hag, but it was still in very, very, very shadowy form, sitting on his chest. Actually, did not have paralysis at the time. And there's Eric Gerard. He physically grabbed her, threw her off the bed. They both went rolling to the floor, and she disappeared. That was a good question. All right, and another one from Sarah. Do you find that most shadow people gravitate to a particular time period in terms of style and culture? It's a real mix. It is really a mix. And now I think that's because shadow people can be all kinds of different things, right? So I know a lot of people, and I get the question all the time, okay, what's a shadow person? They want like a single answer. This is what a shadow person is, and this is why they do this, and this is why they do that. And it's really, really hard to give that answer, because you could have a shadow person as a human spirit. You could have a shadow person as an interdimensional being. You could have a shadow person as a extraterrestrial. So it's really hard to say, whether they try to gravitate toward time period or not. When we talk time slips, what was that, about a month ago? In that sense, if you're seeing a shadow that happens to be a time slip, well, you're not really gravitating toward a particular point in time. They just are in that particular point in time. So it's really just dependent upon the shadow. And that answer frustrates a lot of people when I give it, when I say, well, it depends on the particular type of shadow. But that really is the case. And I understand. People want an answer that's cut and dry so they can understand what this is. It's like, well, we have to break it out from that. It's like saying, I'm going to use a baseball analogy. The team. Okay, great. But you have in Major League Baseball, 30 something teams, right? So, you've got the Red Sox, you've got the Yankees, you've got, well, let's see who's playing right now. The Rangers and the Astros and the Phillies and the Diamondbacks. Those are all each individual ones. They all have their different characteristics, right? So, it's kind of like, okay, which team is this shadow person playing for? Are they playing for the extraterrestrials? Are they playing for the interdimensionals? And then you have to ask the question, okay, if they are an extraterrestrial, okay, fine. If they are an extraterrestrial, where are they coming from? How are they accessing Earth and our plane of existence that they show up as a shadow? Same thing with the interdimensional beings. Which dimension are they showing from? Where are they coming from? How are they coming here? So there's a lot of other questions within that. All right. So I did in this example, I knew something like this was going to come up a bit. I did want to talk about, for an example here, the Albert K. Bender story, whereas what he saw. He's operating the International Flying Saucer Bureau in 1952 when you had the big UFO flap, and all of a sudden, a year later, he shut the whole thing down. And nobody knew why for like 10 years. And he finally explained the story. And usually when I tell the story, I, of course, tell the big part of it, in which, he walks into his bedroom and there are 3 shadowy men that morphed through the wall. However, he had been here and there up to that point in time, seeing, one of these guys over here, and he's like at the movie theater and he sees one of them, down in the corner, and that sort of thing. And then all of a sudden, the one day when he comes home, they just, here they come out of the wall. They had glowing eyes. They're wearing the hats. They had glowing eyes, and they smelled like sulfur. Okay. So given that story, a lot of people will say, well, these are the men in black. Especially during that time when you had a lot of the men in black sightings around a lot of the UFO sightings. Somebody would say, I saw this UFO, and there was some some debris there that got collected by the government, and they of course pawned it off as something else. But then here comes the men in black, and they're interacting with some of the different people. That was around that time frame where those things were happening. So when you have a story where you're seeing a guy here and seeing a guy there, and then all of a sudden, three of them show up in the room, a lot of people are, this is a Men in Black story. Okay. Albert K. Bender says, well, these were actually extraterrestrials, and they were trying to get me to stop my research until one day, like they had a 15-year mission until they left, and then he could go ahead and tell the story, which is what he did. And then somebody like me, coming out of the field that I'm in, paranormal, supernatural, that sort of thing, I listen to the story. I'm like, this is a paranormal story. These are the shadow people that I always talk about. These are the hat men that people always talk about. And even with that, there's a variety of different hats. So if you were to go down that route of like, okay, we're going to say, instead of these other two options, we're going to say they are the paranormal hat men. Okay. But they had a lot of different characteristics, that because some of the hat wearing entities had wide brim hats. They might have a top hat, sort of a cape sort of thing. I've had one account of they're wearing an archer style hat, like something out of Robin Hood. And then the question is why? Sometimes they show them in threes like that. Okay. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes just a single guy. So there's a lot of variety here when we start talking about this type of phenomenon. So Jason asking, has there been any significant reports of shadow phenomena being violent or associated with pending danger? It's a mix. Yeah, that does happen. There have been accounts of, the case that we did that was featured on The Haunted 12 years ago now, if you can believe it's been that long. I showed Carl Johnson there a little while ago in that clip. And a few years back when we had him on the show, I was like, Carl, when was the last time, because he's a demonologist, and he deals with very severe cases a lot. That's his specialty. And I'd asked him, Carl, when was the last case that you would actually deem demonic? Now, this was probably 2 or 3 years ago, so that may have changed in that time. But at the time, he said, Mike, it was that case that you and I had in Oklahoma with the red-eyed shadow entity that we filmed for The Haunted. That one was actually demonic, but it hasn't been since then that any of the cases I've been on I've actually deemed demonic. So, that tells us right there that, yeah, you do have those severe, dangerous cases like that, but, to call it, demonic or whatever is really quite rare. Ours was, that one had gotten pretty nasty, and she was dealing with a red-eyed shadow entity in her closet. That does not mean all red-eyed shadow entities are mean, evil, nasty, nefarious. Hers happened to be. There are many others that are just watching. So again, it's a mix. It just really depends on the particular type of shadow. Yeah, Sarah, that one had there was a cat in the house. It wasn't a shadow cat. The cat was getting skittish, and that was where when it was running around, I followed it through the house, and it stopped right in front of the daughter's bedroom. And I looked in. I saw why it stopped, because there was a big shadow mist that was forming right in the middle of the room. Actually, it was dissipating away. It had formed up in the room. The cat took off around the corner, and then I tried to get a photo of it, which kind of obliterated the whole shadow, and then it just dissipated away. That was the premise of that particular show, The Haunted, which you can find it on some streaming platforms these days. We were the season premiere of season 2, so it would have been episode 1, Monster in the Closet, which was one of the more well-received episodes. But the premise of the show was the interaction and reaction that animals would have to supernatural and paranormal activity. So it had a really good premise. It was on Animal Planet, which is why they went that route. Yeah, Discovery Plus and Travel Channel. That makes sense that it has found its way there. So, all right, we've spent quite a while on that, and we will kind of come back around and incorporate the topic of shadows within some of the other things that we are going to continue to discuss this evening. So I want to move on here to something that's equally as creepy, and that is the black-eyed kids. Yeah, these are, don't let them in your house. These are definitely very, very creepy. And so what I've done here for some of these segments that we're going to do here is, you guys might remember my old Friday night ghost frights. I have clipped out some segments from these for the descriptive parts. And then we have some old Edge of the Rabbit Hole stuff that we're going to do as well. So for those that wanted some creepy, cool music this evening, here you go. Black-eyed children are strange entities, often described as very pale, with completely black eyes, and wearing drab, almost oversized clothing. While their appearance is generally disheveled and shabby, it's the way they talk that causes alarm to most people. They're disconcertedly monotone. Appearing on your front doorstep or even at your car, they will demand entry, but in the most peculiar way. For some unknown reason, they insist on being invited in. And they will say just that, you want to invite us in, along with other methods of persuasion regarding food, making odd statements like, it's food time, or they may even ask to come in and watch the TV, all the while keeping completely monotone. One disturbing line they've been known to say is, this won't take long. It's almost like the classic vampire lore of not being allowed to cross the threshold of the house unless they're invited in. Those who have encountered black-eyed children report they feel they're trapped in a fog with a sort of fight or flight sensation. Part of them wants to give in to the demand and just let them inside, while another part of them just wants to run. Witnesses have reported that once they've refused to let in the BEKs and avert their eyes from these children, the black-eyed kids will suddenly disappear. They'll look up and down the street, but they've completely vanished. Most black-eyed kids appear to be between the ages of 6 and 16, but this can vary. All right, that's a little quick clip from the Friday Night Ghost Frights. That was number like 118 or whatever. I had done like close to 130 of those. It's quite a few. And if you go onto and dig into the YouTube channel and find that playlist, you can see like a metamorphosis of like when I first started those to where I ended up at the end. It's quite a change. There's a lot that let's just say my skills as a videographer got better. In any case, you can dive into that playlist and find the entire video there. I'm going to go ahead and link it here later so that you guys can get a little bit of an easier way into that. So in addendum to this, I'm also going to provide some feedback here from David Weatherly when we had him on Edge of the Rabbit Hole a couple of years ago. So David is, this is kind of his forte. He's written a couple of books on the black-eyed children and this type of phenomenon. He's, George Norian Coast to Coast is always like, hey, if you want to know about black-eyed kids, David's the one to go to, and he really is. He had come across this type of phenomena years ago and just dove into that type of research. And so we had him on to talk about those sort of things. I used to investigate with David way back in the day. Last week when we talked of the Great Circle Earthworks, and I had mentioned that I had just stopped there real quick that first time en route to Indiana for some paranormal investigations that I was doing there. David was one of the guys that I was going to be investigating with on that particular trip. So here we go with David.
And the most fascinating aspect for me at the time was the fact that these encounters, there wasn't a very clear way to classify them. You could look at it and say, well, these could be some kind of ghost encounters, but you can look at it a different way and say, well, these seem like they're connected to the notorious MIB that are UFO related. And again, the more I dug into the topic, the more curious connections I found. So eventually what happened was, of course, the Black-Eyed Children book that examines all the potential possibilities for what these weird figures actually are. I don't believe for a moment they're actually children, but the connections to other types of phenomena, that's very intriguing. And I kind of use the book as a way to present those possibilities and give cases for each possibility that sort of reinforced that potential. So it's a chapter on the potential that there are alien hybrids, and it has some cases that kind of emphasize those aspects and so forth. And really wanted to let people decide for themselves what they thought of the whole matter. And I think I was successful with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Having read your work, and I do need to pick up the revised edition, but having read it and studied it, because on my book, A Walk in the Shadows, I get the question when it comes to shadow people, are Black-Eyed Children shadow entities, which, I don't believe they are, but, so I did, go ahead and dig into, well, David's got, all the information on this. Let me, let me dig in here and study a little bit, because it's, it's a very, to me, kind of an all-inclusive work. You lay out so many different scenarios of what they could be. You have so many different accounts of interactions with these children. I think everybody kind of wants to know, because the whole thing about the Black-Eyed Children is they want into the house. They want to be invited in. So what actually happens when you invite them in?
That's sort of the $1 million question in some ways, because now I'll tell you right up front, if you go online and start researching that, you're going to get tons of stories of people who claim they let them inside, and all these various things happen to them. And a few of those, early on, I tried to contact some of those people, and of course, they don't respond back. That doesn't necessarily mean the accounts aren't valid. I have found through my experience researching this topic that most people who have encountered these children, they are very often very reluctant to talk about the topic. They're traumatized. Essentially, they're trauma victims because of what they've gone through in dealing with these kids. So it's often hard to get details or get extensive things from some of these people. The more direct the encounter was, it's often the more difficult to get information from them. I will say that I've talked to a handful of people who were in close proximity to these kids, and all evidence indicates that the closer the encounter, the more negative the results are. So I have talked to people who've been touched by these kids, or have actually reached out and touched the kids themselves, and have had terrible experiences in the aftermath. They've become physically ill and so forth. There is one story in the book, it's a bit long, that deals with a woman and her child, and a very close encounter with a black-eyed kid. And the result of that was, again, some pretty nasty consequences. It was sickness and other negative domino effects that resulted from being in close proximity to this kid. So, again, all the indications to me are these aren't children at all, but they're some kind of very negative entity.
Yeah, and I would also throw in there, I think that there's some sort of interdimensional being. So, like, I've been asked a lot, are black-eyed kids some form of shadow person? And I don't believe so. There's definitely a difference between shadow people and black-eyed kids. So, it's really, how do I say this? It's really surface level, because, just think about this. With, black-eyed kids, you get full detail of what they look like. Okay. Sure, they have the black eyes. And I think that's probably why people try to relate it to the shadow phenomena. The black eyes, they're kind of very, very drab in their dress. But, you know, even though they're drab in the dress and they have the black eyes, they're still very, very detailed. Like you can see, you have a full kid sitting there in front of you or standing there in front of you. You can see the hair, the details of the clothes, the facial features, all of that. Where with shadow people, it's like in the word, it's a shadow, so you really don't get the facial features most times. Even though sometimes you might get the glowing eyes, most times you don't see eyes. You don't really see nose, mouth, anything like that. The clothing, if you get a kind of you get kind of a idea of what the clothing is, if they are wearing clothing. Sometimes it's just a humanoid form, and that's it. But sometimes if they're like wearing the hats and the duster, it's like, okay, you can see the outline of the hat. You can kind of tell that they're wearing a duster that would go with that type of hat, or the top hat and the cape. Okay, you can kind of see the cape flowing out from behind it, but it's still shadowy in form. You don't get the real detail. There's also, with black-eyed kids, they need permission to get inside. Like there's coaxing you to come in, whether that's like in the first clip, it's food time, you want to let us in that sort of thing. So they can't come in unless you invite them in. But with shadows, they're already in there. They're walking around, they're flitting about, all that sort of thing. They don't need permission to get in. So they are different types of entities. But I do believe that there is a type of relationship in the sense that I believe they are both, well, depending on the shadow. Again, that can be many, many different things, but some shadows are interdimensional beings. And I believe the black-eyed children are also some sort of interdimensional being from some other plane of existence that sometimes comes into this realm. So I believe that's, I believe in that sense, that would be a relationship there. So I like, where'd it go with Tom? Tom says, Halloween is coming up, so beware of kids with hoodies. That's right. You never know if that kid in the hoodie showing up at your door is a black-eyed kid. Now, that would be creepy, wouldn't it? If somebody actually did that for a Halloween costume, and you're up on, all the, lore and legends of black-eyed kids, and some kid shows up on your doorstep, trick or treat. You want to give me candy? That would be really creepy, right? You want to put your hand in that bowl and give me candy? That would be really super creepy. Oh, wow. All right, so let's see. I think Sarah had a question down here. All right. Could BEK be projections into the physical plane from an interdimensional space? Has anyone touched BEK? So yeah, that's kind of what I was just saying there with interdimensional space. And David, in that clip there, addressed the touching them physically, that a lot of people, kind of get sick and that sort of thing, which is really unfortunate. All right, so we're going to move on a little bit here from black-eyed children. So yeah, the real creepy stuff, but still, even this stuff coming up can be creepy. And a lot of people are interested these days in skinwalkers. So of course there's the big to-do with Skinwalker Ranch, but the skinwalkers that comes out of Native American legends with the Navajo. And so I'm going to do the same thing here with the clip, and I'm going to let that play so that you can get the taste of the old Friday night ghost fright. And then I'll come back with an interview clip with our good friend James Keenan. Throughout the American Southwest, the legends of skinwalkers thrive, with most stories originating in New Mexico and Utah. Skinwalkers are shape-shifting entities that live in and amongst the tribe. Originally a medicine man or a shaman who has chosen an evil path and takes the form of an animal to inflict suffering on others. In order to become a skinwalker, the shaman must be initiated by a secret society of other skinwalkers and is required to kill a close family member. They wear the skins of the animals they transform into, which is why the Navajo insist the tribe not wear the pelt of any predatory animal. They don't want to mistake the skinwalker as one of their own. Skinwalkers are laden with many special attributes, including mind reading, controlling thoughts, the ability to jump high cliffs, and they are supposed to be able to outrun cars. They are said to be able to control night creatures such as wolves and owls to do their bidding, and can also reanimate the dead to attack their enemies. Witnesses who report skinwalker encounters report seeing anthropomorphic creatures that are half human and half animal, and the encounters are quick and sudden. For instance, in one encounter, a man and his nephew saw a large deer on the side of the road, and when they got closer, it leapt over a nearby fence with 2 legs that looked human. Many have reported seeing canine-type skinwalkers, creatures having the head of a dog or a wolf and the body of a man. One man even reported an encounter with a skinwalker that had a dog-like body, but it had a human head and human hands and feet. It had bright white eyes, and he and his cousins encountered it on a path in the woods one night. Although they were paralyzed with fear, the skinwalker sprinted away into the woods, away from them. Many people also report seeing the canine types running alongside their cars, thinking a dog is chasing them. But then they look and are shocked to see the human traits of the creature intertwined with the animal. Some people believe encounters with skinwalkers will form curses, and those who cross their paths will suddenly suffer from bad luck, nightmares, and health problems. Cleansings from good Native American shamans are sought out in these cases, with rituals and sacred smoke to ward off the bad energy given to the victim by the skinwalker. All right. So yeah, again, you can find that in the Friday Night Ghost Frights playlist, but it's also in the Supernatural Creatures. Both of those are the Supernatural Creatures playlist, and so will the next one when we get into Windigo. So I will link all that stuff in here. Those listening to the podcast version later, you want to come on out here to the live show on YouTube or through the Connected Universe portal. That, of course, has the after show, and I'll put all the links in the portal, too. All right. So, yeah, Skinwalkers. This has been really, really popular lately because, of course, the television show. And what's interesting about that video is I do talk about some of the different occurrences there that happened before Brandon Fugel came on board and bought the property. And the show, of course, morphed out of his purchase. Really, really fascinating things that are going on there. What is powering the area? Why is there so much supernatural activity that happens there? Not just from the Skinwalkers, which apparently are still moving in and about the area. I mean, it was a curse that the Navajo had put onto the Utes. So that's where that stems from, and some of the really bizarre mutilations and things like this end up getting attributed to the Skinwalkers. But even if there's not a mutilation around, there are still times people claim that they see these things, or they hear strange animal type noises that aren't native to that area. That people that work those ranches for decades and decades and decades, they're familiar with the various animal calls of the surrounding area, and they will hear things that are just like blood curdling. Like, what in the world is that? So I do have a clip here from our Edge of the Rabbit Hole episode with James Keenan when we had him on a couple of years ago. A good friend of mine, and he's been on the television show. And he's done a lot of research out there in that area. So he specializes in the research into the electromagnetism of the area. And through his profession, he's really very learned in petroglyphs and things like that of the American Southwest.
Whatever is energetic, or whatever causes or creates this paranormal activity, there's many different types of events occurring, and they seem to, for some reason, be feeding off of the location and what that energy is. And it's kind of interesting because for the first 5 or 6 years, I had been leaning in one direction. And in the last 6 months, we've found so much new information and details, and things have occurred that I've changed in what I believe is happening based upon the data points collected, what's been seen. And really, it seems to be that whatever is taking place is caused by whatever's underground. There's something very energetic. I believe it's magnetic, based upon data points being collected. And there's a unique substances, metals, minerals, I guess you could say. It's hydrocarbons. There's something specifically called gilsonite, which is only found in 3 places in the world. And the gilsonite on the Uinta Basin happens to be the best of this product. And its properties, when mixed with probably the piezoelectric abilities, because of all the quartz at the location on the Uinta Basin, it's very saline water in underground. You just have this coming together of so many. It's almost as if everything's just melding together there at the right time, the right place. And it hasn't just been for 100 years. When I initially started this off, I would consider myself an avocational archaeologist. That was what I was degreed in from the University of California at Santa Barbara. And I tracked Mesoamerican culture, and I've tracked it all the way up to Utah and was big into the petroglyphs and the pictographs. And it was amazing to me what I was seeing, that these anthropomorphic creatures and these objects were just, they shouldn't belong from 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. It looked more like I was watching a science fiction movie or a paranormal movie from our current age.
Yeah, that's something that's really fascinated me about that area of the country, and not far off the beaten path there. If you go south from Utah into New Mexico, there is Chaco Canyon, which is one of my favorite locations down there. And you see the petroglyphs of what are the star people. This is the indigenous peoples of the area saying these are petroglyphs of the star people using the portals, and you have the spiral pattern that are coming down here to Earth, which, kind of like James said, is like very, very kind of sci-fi-ish. But this is their explanation for what's going on here. And I do agree with him that it's going to be something that is electromagnetic in nature and has to do with the metals and minerals that are buried there in the ground. This is something I talk about with my work with the Alaska Triangle and the other magnetic areas around the globe, that when we talk about triangle areas, or we talk about the telluric currents, people commonly refer to them as ley lines. When we talk about that sort of thing, we're talking about the electromagnetism of the Earth rising up out of the core. It's spinning molten iron, which creates a magnetic field. That magnetic field protects our planet from the solar wind. Otherwise, we'd be fried. It also helps to keep our atmosphere here. But as it passes through, that magnetism passes through the Earth's mantle, the crust, it's interacting with different metals and minerals. And depending on what that magnetism runs into, the type of metal, how big the deposit is, that sort of thing, it creates different electromagnetic fields. And like James said, I believe that is what is happening there at Skinwalker Ranch in the Uinta Basin. So a lot of this strange phenomena is being generated because of that. Now, when we say generated, what does that mean? Because people have talked about, okay, there's UFO activity, there's ghosts, there's apparitions, there's these skinwalker creatures. What about the people talking about portals? And yes, to all of the above. It is creating a type of field, a type of situation. which can make those things happen. So are some of these things time slips? Are some of them opening up portals that act as gateways for whether it's the UFOs or some of these strange creatures? Yeah, absolutely. We've talked before about NASA admitting to the X-points, the portals that are up there in space. Same thing down here. So that's a deeper conversation for another time, and we've talked about that sort of thing before. And in talking about the Skinwalkers, Alina, who in their right mind would sacrifice their loved ones. That's exactly the point. Is basically you're damning your soul to become this thing. It's basically like a cult. So this is a shamanic cult that has become these shape-shifting creatures. So the time has actually flown here. There's a couple more clips I wanted to show. So the one here that I wanted to show is since we had been talking shadows and we're talking skinwalkers here, and we are in the few minutes that we have also going to hit Windigo. This here is a clip that's actually a sneak peek of Shadow Dimension Season 2. So far, the only ones that have been able to see this are those that are members of the Connected Universe portal. They have access to more sneak peeks, by the way. And also those that were at the Phenomicon conference here at the beginning of September when we ran the Shadow Dimension for the film festival part of that. And so there's a interesting story that is a part of this. It does touch on some shadow activities Dan Class talks about. But then Sean Gilmore talks about a really, really interesting creature that he saw there back behind the Hinsdale house. One of the questions that we've had is, does this type of activity occur more often at places with reported portal activity? Now, when we talk about portals, this is basically something that is spawning off from some different electromagnetic anomalies. You have that vortex energy that's welling up from the Earth's magnetic core, interacting with different minerals and metals, water within the Earth's crust, and that will create these different anomalies. And there are these hotspot areas of the world that are more active than others. One of these locations is the Hinsdale house out in New York.
The Hinsdale house became famous in the 1970s. A family from Buffalo purchased the location in 1970 and immediately started having strange occurrences happen at the house, from poltergeist activity to physical attacks. They were seeing entities and anomalies on the outside of the house that they couldn't explain, and it ended up getting to a point where they needed to have some help. They contacted a priest from St. Bonaventure University, and it actually got to a point where he came and did a mass there, and then ended up getting the okay to do a structural exorcism or a cleansing of the house in April of 1974, which didn't work. There was also an instance up in the woods. Two brothers, they were arguing about religion, and he ended up shooting him and killing him. And a lot of people associate some of the energy on the property with this brother that died, because there's a shadow figure that's been captured, a full body apparition in the woods of a man in overalls. The shadow figure itself that's been captured, it looks like he's holding a gun. Also a Native American woman out by the pond. The whole property itself, it's got Native American elements, and I feel like there's just so many different layers dating back to the 1700s that you can really look at and try to see what's making the land and the area around it tick.
Lands have energy, and some lands are sacred. I think in Hinsdale, and I've talked to people of native, the Senecas and other natives that live in that area, have told me that area was pretty hot for as far as lots of things happening and for ceremony and things like that. And so the land, the Native Americans knew where to find these places. They could feel it because they dealt with energy like you and I deal with a commute in the morning, to go to work. That was their daily thing. And so they could find these places, and that's where they would do ceremonies. That's where they would do rituals, of coming of age and things like that. I think Hinsdale is a big part of that.
Well, what I saw was like a humanoid figure on the hill. We were sitting by the fire, and the team was investigating inside the house. So we were kind of like having our break time and talking, and we looked over and we saw what to me at first looked like a man kind of crouched down with his arms kind of like resting on his knees. And The thing that was weird about it, though, really, really big dark eyes and had antlers. And it scared us so much. I'm like, what is that? And I found 2 large sticks that were in the fire pit, or the firewood pile. And I just raised them above my arm. I started waving them above my head and yelling like you would treat a bear. It kind of like lofted away, made no noise.
So we see these locations that have heightened paranormal activity, that have a lot of shadow encounters, also see some of this other strange phenomena as well that seems to be attracted to it. Is it the land? Is there something there about the land that is drawing these entities forth from whatever this other dimension is to come into our world, appearing as these shadows? All right. And yeah, there was a bit there with our good friend Coyote Chris Sutton, who passed away a couple of years ago. I give a nice tribute to him in that first episode when I had interviewed him for Shadow Dimension Season 1. Didn't even ask him about Hinsdale. We were talking about Mineral Springs Hotel, and all of a sudden he just launched into an example using Hinsdale. And so that was wonderful to be able to, have that clip to be able to use in Season 2, and then give him a nice tribute there for Season 1, or for Episode 1 of Season 2. So that'll be early next year. At this point, it's currently in post-production. So great to see you here, Sage and Mr. Kuman. Ancient Egypt, Anubis, Skinwalkers, perhaps. It's part of the ancient Egyptian religion, where one of the parts of the soul is the shadow. Anubis is actually a psychopomp. In other words, what that is an entity, a guide to take a soul into the afterlife. So when the Egyptian soul, when the Egyptian person passes away, most parts of the soul go on to the constellation of Orion, and essentially Anubis is like the ferryman, right? And he guides the soul across to the other land there. The shadow part stays here on Earth. The Ka also does for a while. That's the animated part of the soul, but then it eventually moves on as well after it's finished doing whatever it wants to be here for. So we don't have a lot we don't have time to dive into that. We only have a couple minutes here. So I do want to quickly do Windigo. The Windigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation, its desiccated skin pulling tautly over its bones. With its bones pushing out against its skin, its complexion the ash gray of death, and its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets. The Windigo looked like a gaunt skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. What lips it had were tattered and bloody. Its body was unclean and suffering from suppurations of the flesh, giving off a strange and eerie odor of decay and decomposition, of death and corruption. Basil Johnston, Ojibwa teacher and scholar, Ontario, Canada. There are a number of variations to the Windigo story, but these creatures are usually sighted in the Great Lakes region, often in Minnesota, and then up into the central regions of Canada. These humanoid creatures feed on humans in order to survive the harsh winters of the area, and may have begun as humans themselves, making them cannibals. In fact, according to some Algonquin legends, a Windigo spirit is created whenever a human resorts to cannibalism, something that used to happen at times during those dark, bitter winters. The word Windigo can be roughly translated to mean evil spirit that devours mankind, and devour it does. The appetite of the Windigo is said to be insatiable and never-ending, constantly feasting no matter how much it eats. The Ojibwa tribe legend states, "It was a large creature as tall as a tree, with a lipless mouth and jagged teeth. Its breath was a strange hiss, its footprints full of blood, and it ate any man, woman, or child who ventured into its territory. And those were the lucky ones. Sometimes the Windigo chose to possess a person instead, and then the luckless individual became a Windigo himself, hunting down those he had once loved and feasting upon their flesh." The stories are a mixture, ranging from a monster with characteristics of a human to an evil spirit who has taken possession of a human. Whichever the case, many of these have grown to a height of about 15 feet and possess glowing eyes, sharp claws, and yellowed fangs licked over by an extra long tongue. While these creatures are gluttonous and constantly eating, they appear as if they're on the brink of starvation. Yet, other legends state the Wendigo are agile, possess a great deal of speed, and have outstanding stamina to survive the long winters. These legends also state the Wendigo can mimic human voices and lure people out of the forest toward them. Once a person is isolated, the Wendigo attacks and devours the human. Much of our modern artwork depicts these entities as anthropomorphic creatures, much like the half-human, half-animal, shape-shifting skinwalkers of Navajo lore. However, Wendigo are not skinwalkers, and the Native American descriptions of Wendigo do not include antlers on their heads, like many of these illustrations depict. These carnivorous creatures are something else. First of all, that the Wendigo are not anthropomorphic shapeshifters rules them out as skinwalkers. However, the fact that they're humanoid, smelling of decaying flesh, incessantly feeding off of human beings, and being able to create more Wendigo creatures out of humans gives them more of the characteristics of zombies from our modern pop culture. How many zombie movies and television shows depict a rotting human eating other humans and being able to create more of their own kind? Perhaps the modern zombie lore has had some influence from the old Wendigo legends. Yeah, and that's a big differentiation that I like to make there, because I'll get asked a lot, are Skinwalkers and Wendigo just the same thing, but in different parts of the country? And it's like, no, because the characteristics are different. There might be a couple similarities in there, but just the fact that you have the Skinwalkers as shape-shifting creatures and the Wendigo as ones that are, not only zombies, but they're very cannibalistic in nature. And there's actually some, I know we're at the hour mark, but I'm going to continue on here for a couple minutes. There's actually some very, very sad stories that are associated with this. And I include them in a walk in the shadows, because people will ask me if there are, if Skinwalkers, if Wendigo, some of these different entities are actually types of shadow entities, types of shadow people. And no, they're not. But like this individual here. So this is the OG Cree chief Jack Fiddler, which of course would have been his anglicized name. I'm just going to read this off real quick. This is straight out of one of my books. In the early 1900s, there was an OG Cree chief named Jack Fiddler, who was also a medicine man and known far and wide for his powers to conjure animals and to defeat Wendigos. 14 Wendigos are said to have fallen by Jack's hand, many of which were said to have been sent by enemy shamans. Still yet, others were known to be cannibals and craved to eat human flesh. In these cases, Jack was usually asked by a family to kill a sick family member before they, quote-unquote, turned Wendigo. And one of these cases included Jack's brother, Peter Flett. Peter was on a trading expedition that ran out of food, and he ultimately resorted to cannibalism. Several cases like this were recorded in the records of the Hudson's Bay Company traders. Eventually, in 1907, Jack Fiddler and his brother Joseph were tried for the murder of Joseph's daughter-in-law in a Wendigo case, and the two men pled guilty. Jack stated the girl was on the verge of transforming into a Wendigo and needed to be killed before she murdered and ate other members of the tribe. So yeah, it definitely has that kind of, zombie type feel of, if this person was bit, they're going to turn into one and then eat others. That's totally everything that we have with like The Walking Dead and Last of Us, that sort of stuff. But we're talking about, okay, they did those things. They actually murdered those people to prevent that from happening. But there were others in that region at that time that did resort to cannibalism because of whatever harsh reality was going on at the time. Like that on the trade route, they ran out of food. People died of starvation and others ate them. And then before that, this individual here, his name was Swift Runner. He's a Native American who in 1879 murdered and ate his entire family that winter, claiming he was possessed by the Wendigo spirit. So he's saying he was possessed by the Wendigo spirit. Essentially what it is it was a cold, harsh winter. They ran out of food. And he killed and ate his family. But then you have these legends of these creatures that kind of get meshed into the harsh reality of these people actually performing cannibalism. And you do see some similar type stories. This was interesting on the Alaska Triangle with that particular television show. So we had the episode on the Kushtaka, which is a very, very similar type of creature. The Kushtaka is an otter man, type of a beast, right? So if you can imagine a man type shape with an otter, but would perform similar things. So hanging out in the woods, would lure people out into the woods, would either kill and eat them, or would bite them and turn them into another Kushtaka. So a very, very similar type of lure to the Windigo, just instead of these, other characteristics with how they look here, like you see here in some of these illustrations of what people think a Wendigo looks like. They had the otter head going on. So you do see some of that lore, and why that was interesting on the Alaska Triangle is we covered the Kushtaka season 1, season 2. You had people around, it was in the Panhandle area, I think it was near Juneau somewhere, where they were talking about encountering Windigo there, which is kind of a far cry from the Great Lakes area, Minnesota, and then Canada. They were kind of right above Minnesota. So, but not to say creatures can't migrate. So, all right, we are winding down to the end here. If there's any last comments, questions, that sort of thing. See some comments here about Hinsdale House. Sarah, perhaps there are links between Windigo and Bigfoot. I would say they're two different creatures. We could get into all the different variations and things like that, but are they? Here's where, again, you could try to draw some sort of correlation, kind of like what you're doing between shadows and black-eyed children, saying that, well, they're two different things. The one relationship that they have is they could each be a type of interdimensional being that are coming in from some other plane of existence. You could make that case for both Windigo and Bigfoot as well. So that would make all of these different things to some degree or not interrelated. So, all right, we are going to go ahead and wrap up the public side over here. Really do appreciate everyone joining us this evening. Those listening to the podcast version later, again, please join us every Wednesday night, 8:00 p.m. Eastern time. You want to join us for the after show as well and get all the other material that's on the back end of the Connected Universe portal, which is going to be we're looking at doing some things to expand it and make it an even better experience out there. So that is connecteduniverseportal.com. $5 super chat from Tom McNicholas. Spooky and interesting. Really appreciate that, since this was our spooky episode for the season. Next week, we have psychic medium Erica Marks. That's going to be an Edge of the Rabbit Hole episode with Victoria. So please join us for that next week. And yes, like Jen said, super chat superstar Tom McNicholas. And Jill had a quick question here. Are Wendigos only seen at night? No, but I would say more prevalent at night, just like any other type of creature. It's easier to hunt during that time, but they're not only exclusively seen at night. So, all right. And yes, happy Halloween, everyone. Those that are members of the Connecting Universe portal, I will see you out there on the portal side. Everyone else, enjoy the rest of your evening. Till next time, if time really exists.